thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. And today we are here to talk a little bit about the EB-5 program, and we're going to talk about the EB-5 program, both in terms of the Regional Center program and also the Direct Investment program. Before we jump into it, just a few housekeeping items. If you do have any questions, you can enter the questions in either the chat function or the Q&A function. We will get to all questions. So even if we don't get to the question right as we're going through the presentation, we will definitely get to them. The other thing is, after the presentation, we will send you a number of different things. We will send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation that we are going through. We will also send you a recording to this webinar. And finally, we will send you an EB-5 guide. And this is a comprehensive guide that we've put together about the EB-5 program. And it goes through a lot of the items that we have, that we will go through in the presentation. And finally, this presentation will focus on moving from a non-immigrant visa, such as an E2 visa, to an EB-5. So we will talk about some of the transition aspects to that. And also, because a lot of our clients move from E2 to EB-5, we will talk about some of the challenges or some of the differences between the E2 visa program and the EB-5 program. So without further ado, we will move and start the presentation. So very quickly, before we jump into the EB-5 program, I do want to touch on the different types of investor visas. So, you'll see on this slide a number of different types of investor visas, and they're all quite different. So we have the E2 visa. The biggest thing with the E2 visa is that you can only get an E2 visa if you're national from certain countries. In terms of the investment amount, the amount that you have to invest, it's not a set amount, it's a subjective amount. And we do have specific and separate E2 visa webinars. So I encourage you to either check out our YouTube channel, and where this and other videos are posted, and you could either sign up for a future E2 visa webinar, or you could look at some of the old E2 visa webinars that we have on our YouTube channel, and just remember to hit the subscribe button so that you are notified of future videos, because we do post at least 3 videos every week. In terms of employment for the E2 visa, there is no set job number in terms of number of employees that you have to hire. It's and you will see with EB-5 that's very different, where EB-5 does have a specific number that is required. The next investor visa is the national interest waiver, a EB2 NIW category. And for this, again, we have completely separate webinars on this. And those webinars are usually about an hour long. So we do encourage you to take a look at those. But this is something that's increasingly being used, excuse me, for entrepreneurs. And we have a number of clients that, in particular, were on E2 visas and then moved to a green card through the National Interest Waiver Program. The next one is the International Entrepreneur Rule. Now, unfortunately, although we had high hopes for this investor immigration benefit, it's one that A, we do have a separate webinar on, but B, unfortunately, it is not one that has gained a lot of traction. There have only been a handful of applications actually filed, and even less actually approved. And then finally, we move to the EB-5 green card. And just in terms of an overview of this program, the program is finally what I'll call it is settled, in the sense that over the last year, there's been a lot of back and forth with respect to this program. But on March 11th, the government finalized a number of different things. So first and foremost, they finalized what the investment amount for the program is, because the investment amount was a higher number than someone sued the government, and it was a lower number, but we weren't sure if that number was going to stick. But now they finalized that. They have also made some important changes to the program so that this type of confusion doesn't happen again. And they've also introduced some benefits of the program, where if someone is in the US on a visa and they apply for the EB-5 program, they can actually move a lot faster to apply for the actual green card benefits. So we're going to talk about those in more detail as we go through. The other thing with the EB-5 program is it's broken down into two buckets. One bucket is the regional center program. So that is for someone who is a passive investor and really wants to, take $800,000, invest it. Let's say that there's a group that's building a hotel. They want to invest that money, and then they really want to passively invest and not really have anything or much more to do with the investment. The project will create the requisite number of jobs. The direct investment program is for someone who wants to invest the 800,000 or $1 million in their own business and wants control over their own destiny and their own project and money, and they create the 10 full-time jobs themselves. So really a very different investor profile, but both are available for the EB-5 program. So as I said, the regional centers for fairly passive investors. Some more kind of information on the regional centers is that there is a fairly high administrative cost associated with the regional centers. Usually it's going to be between $30,000 and $50,000 that you're required to invest for that. And the regional centers, it's very, very low return. So less than a 1% return. And then in fact, it's worse than less than 1% return, because the actual, when you take into account the administrative fee, the return is actually negative. Also, with the projects, there is a, like it's an investment like any other investment. So there is a risk that you are investing into the project, and there is a risk that you could lose, your money. So it's different from the situation where you are a direct investor and you have a little bit more control over your own destiny. The other big difference with the regional center is that the regional center, when you're looking at the number of jobs that have to be created, the regional center, you are permitted to include what are called indirect jobs. So those are jobs that, let's say that you are investing in a restaurant, for example. The direct jobs would be the people that work at the restaurant, the cooks, the people, waiters, etc. And the indirect jobs might be the jobs that an economist might be able to point to, that says that as a result of that restaurant being there, there are ancillary benefits to the economy, because the restaurant may generate jobs for other people, for example, the people who have to transport the people to the restaurant, etc. And an economist will drive a report and show that there are X number of indirect jobs that were created. And this can only be used with regional centers. For the direct investment, it's not possible to use that. And the other thing with regional center is that the motivating factor of the investor is that they just want a green card. So it's not that because often the direct investments get the double benefit of, they get to develop and direct their own enterprise, but they also get the green card. But the regional center, often people are applying because certainly there's the return is not anything to speak of. So the only reason they're doing it is for the green card. In contrast, the direct investment, the individual has control over their process. The individual return can be a lot higher. We already talked about direct jobs, that they're the only ones that can be counted. Indirect jobs cannot. The other thing is that this particular program, the EB-5 direct investment program, is not subject to reauthorization. So a lot of the problems that we saw last year, where the regional center program was paused, even all of that time that the regional center program was paused, the direct investment program was still alive and well. So people were still investing in that, because that program does not require reauthorization. The other thing with the direct investment is, if you do have an E2 visa and you've invested, then there is a good chance that much of the money that you invested in the E2 process can be counted towards the EB-5 process. So that's something to keep in mind. So now, in terms of the details of the EB-5 program, and these apply to both regional center and to direct investment, that your investment has to be either $800,000 or $1,050,000. And the difference in terms of which one you are going to select, it will just depend on where your business is. So if your business is in what's called a targeted employment area, or a rural area, and targeted employment area is defined as the unemployment rate being 1.5 times the national average, then you are going to be able to invest the lower investment amount, whereas if not, you would have to invest the higher investment amount. And the investment has to be made in what's called a new commercial enterprise. However, the new commercial enterprise is not a new business. It's a business that's formed after 1990. So we have EB-5 investors that have had their business for 20 years, and maybe they got an E2 some time ago, and then they are now applying for the EB-5 program and utilizing the investment that they made 20 years ago. And we just had an approval the other day with that exact fact pattern. Someone that we didn't do the original E2, but we did the EB-5, and they did their own E2 20 years before. In terms of the investment that can be included, so the money does have to come from your personal funds. It can come from a gift. It can come from a loan. The loan can be secured, unsecured. If the loan is secured, then you do have to show where you got the money to buy the security. The only type of loan that's not permitted is when the business assets are the actual security. So if it is a secured loan, then it would have to be your personal assets and not the actual business assets. As I mentioned, the investment can be made over time. So, if you're investing $800,000 or $1 million, it doesn't have to be one-time investment. You could have invested 100,000 over 10 years and then apply for the EB-5. The only thing is that the EB-5 program, there is a source of funds requirement that's nothing like E2, and the government wants to kind of make you audit penny for penny, dollar for dollar, where you got the money from. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. And even if you have an E2 investment, the source of fund requirement for the E2 is going to be different from the source of fund requirement for the EB-5. The other kind of important thing is the investment does have to be investment, not retained earnings. So when I say that, let's say that you started a company and the company made $2 million and you had $1 million of profit left over in retained earnings, then you couldn't then turn around and say, okay, I'm applying for an EB-5 because I have $1 million. The money would have to be paid out to you. You'd have to pay taxes on it and then reinvest that money back into the business. So that's that's just something to keep in mind, that that retained earnings doesn't count. Some of the other differences between E2 and EB-5 is that E2, you can include things like legal fees and other administrative fees. The EB-5, you cannot include those in your, like let's say you were doing a direct investment and you paid your lawyer $50,000, that wouldn't be, it wouldn't be part of the $800,000 or $1 million. The other big difference that we see with E2 and EB-5 is that for E2, it's permitted to just buy an enterprise. So let's say that you are you want to purchase a restaurant, and you have $1 million, and you give the seller $1 million, and then you say, I want to turn around and apply for an EB-5 now. Well, that wouldn't work for EB-5, but it would work for E2. For EB-5, you have to actually invest in the business, and when you give the seller the money, that's not considered investing in the business because there's no link to job creation. So even if you purchase that business and the business had 10 employees, that wouldn't work. You would actually have to purchase the business and then invest another $800,000 or $1,050,000 in the business, and then create, let's say the business had 10 full-time workers already, then that money that you invested, you would have to create an additional 10 full-time workers. So in that case, maybe there would be 20 that would have to be created. The investment has to be an equity investment, like it's supposed to a loan, but there's no percentage, unlike E2. For the E2 visa, if you want an investor visa, you have to own at least 50% of the entity. For EB-5, there's no requirement. You can own 1%, half fraction, even a fraction of a percent. And that can be in limited partnership units, equity, membership units, doesn't matter. Now, the entity type doesn't matter. In terms of job creation, for E2, there's no kind of specific number of jobs that have to be created, but for EB-5 there is. It's 10 full-time jobs, so not part-time jobs, full-time jobs, and and those jobs have to be provided to green card holders or U.S. citizens. So that's something to keep in mind. With E2, you can hire anybody from, as long as they have legal authorization to work. If you're doing direct investment, the EB-5 program requires a very detailed and comprehensive business plan. So that's something that is needed. And we talked about as well that the money that's invested has to be linked to job creation. So the example that I used for the restaurant is you have to invest the money, and then that money has to be used to create the jobs. So if the jobs were created before the money was invested, then those jobs aren't going to count. You have to create 10 new jobs. And then, you just have to make sure that you're properly documenting so that you are, because, you can't, the workers have to be green card holders or US citizens, and you have to provide proof of that to make sure they're qualifying. In terms of the applications that are filed, we filed an I-526 application, which is the application that says, this person is investing for EB-5. And then the great thing that just happened recently, when you do a green card application, if you're in the United States, you can now concurrently file the I-485 application. If you're not in the United States, then you're going to be looking at consular processing. So getting the green card at the consulate. The big problem with EB-5 right now is that the applications are taking 3 or 4 years to be processed. So that's quite a bit of time, and with that, the introduction of allowing applicants to file the I-485 is great, because if they're in the United States, they can get all of the green card benefits probably within 1 year. And then the final application that's completed is the I-829, and that's completed 2 years after the individual gets their green card. Basically, it's the application that's showing that the person has actually created 10 full-time jobs. This slide is just showing some of the changes to the program, many of which we've gone over already. The program, it's been reauthorized, the regional center program, until September 30th, 2027. As I said, the next 2 bullets are really getting at, they put in a number of safeguards to prevent this from happening again. So they've now said that anything filed before September 30th, 2026 will be adjudicated, because what happened last time is that once the program wasn't reauthorized, they stopped adjudicating everything for almost a year. So that created a big problem. This second bullet point is not applicable anymore. The new filing 60 days, that 60 days has passed. And we've talked about the differences in investment amount. And the other kind of important thing to note is that the targeted employment area, they have made this a bit more difficult. In the past, it was a little too easy. And then the other kind of big piece, and this is something that will impact mainly nationals from China or other countries that have delays in getting the visa because they're oversubscribed, is that the government has now set aside visas for these categories: rural areas, high unemployment areas. So that's going to be higher than the 1.5 times the national average, or infrastructure projects. And that's important because we have, for example, one of our clients, it's a Chinese national, is still waiting for the green card because there's a several-year delay. But if the project that they invested in met one of these 3 criteria, they would be able to apply for the green card. So here, kind of more changes to the program. And this was a big thing because people had invested the $500,000 based on kind of the lawsuit that had occurred, and the amount reverting back to the older amount. But we weren't clear that those applications would be adjudicated, but the government confirmed that. We talked about the I-485, which is the person can apply for work authorization and travel authorization. And the other kind of big change is that now when you prove your source of funds, you do have to prove the source of funds of the administrative and legal fees as well. So before, the source of funds just related to the 500,000 or the 800,000 that was invested. But if you are doing a regional center filing, the legal fees could be 30, 40,000, and the administrative fees could be 30, 40,000. So it's an additional money that you have to prove where the money came from. The government clarified that loans and gifts are fine because there was some controversy with loans and gifts where the government wanted to limit who could give a gift. So the gift would have to come from an immediate family member rather than just from anybody. And then there were some changes that provided some remedy if something happened in the program, like let's say the program was subject to fraud or something like that. There were some changes to provide some remedy for that. Other things to consider, with EB-5, the money, like, if you, let's say that you were doing a direct investment and you took $1,050,000 and put it in a bank account, that wouldn't be sufficient. The government would not consider that at risk. We talked about loans and gifts, so gifts are fine. The one thing with gifts, though, if you do get a gift from someone, then you have to make sure that that person has paid the gift tax in their jurisdiction, because the petition is not going to be adjudicated for many, many years, and the government will ask to see that. Similarly, if you get a loan from somebody, then you have to show loan payments that were made. That's going to be an important part. We talked about purchasing a business. That doesn't work for EB-5 in the way that it works for E2. Investment structure, so you can own a fraction of a percent if you like. There's no requirement there. There can be no guarantee on returns. So, you couldn't say that, okay, invest in my company and I'm going to guarantee that you're going to get your money back or you're going to get X return. That doesn't work for EB-5. And we talked about a lot of the differences between E2 and EB-5. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go through an example, an EB-5 example, just to an EB-5 example just to illustrate a few points. So, let's say that this person, Helen, she was on an E2 in 2015, and she purchased a business for $300,000, and the business had, 5 employees, and she paid lawyers $40,000 in legal fees. And we're going to assume for the purposes of this example that the investment amount is $500,000, not $800,000. But then at the end of 2019, she invested another $200,000. It was given as a gift, and the person that gave the gift got the money from an inheritance. And then, and the person also, instead of giving the money to Helen, they deposited the money directly into Helen's business bank account. And when the $200,000 was invested, Helen had 10 full-time workers at the company, and she hired 5 since she bought the business. So 5 had started, and she hired another 5. At the end of 2019, she paid herself a bonus of $100,000 after the company made $1 million. And then in January, she applied for the EB-5 green card, showing her total investment of $1.5 million, which is the $300,000 initial, the $200,000 that she got as a gift, and then the $1 million that she made as profit. And she included information that she's already created the 10 full-time jobs, so has fulfilled that requirement. So let's go through this and talk about the problem. So the first problem is the $300,000 that she used. It works for E2, but she used the $300,000. She purchased a business with $300,000 and gave that money to the seller. So that money doesn't count towards the EB-5. So the business can still qualify, and she can still invest additional money into that business, but the $300,000 doesn't count. Similarly, the 5 full-time employees that were there when she purchased the business don't count towards the 10. She paid lawyer fees of $40,000 when she's those lawyer fees would not count towards EB-5 because they're an administrative fee, but it does have to show where she got the money to pay for the $40,000. So now at the end of 2019, she got a gift for $200,000. So the gift is fine. The gift can be included. However, she has to show where that person got the $200,000 from. So even though the person inherited the money, the government's not just going to accept that the person inherited the money. You have to actually go back, and even though the person that inherited the money has passed away, the person's passed away, you have to go back and find out where that person got the money from. So it can be quite complicated. The other kind of interesting thing here is that, she paid herself a bonus of $100,000. So you have to be very, very careful when you are doing EB-5, because that 100,000 cannot be counted towards any investment. So if she like right now, her investment amount is 200,000, but when you back out the 100,000, her investment amount really is 100,000 now. So she still has to come up with a lot more money. And then, of course, the $1 million that she has in revenue doesn't count towards the investment because it's retained earnings. So that, that example illustrates a few of the points that we talked about. In terms of other considerations, we did talk about timing already, that it's 3 to 4 years. We actually have sued the U.S. government on a number of occasions to compel them to adjudicate the petitions faster, and we've been successful when we've done it. The country-specific quotas. So this is really getting at what we talked about with China is a good example, where the visas several years delayed. So it's when the country has received many EB-5s, and that happens. It's happened with China, India, a few other countries in the past. The timing and planning is everything with respect to EB-5, because it extends over such a period of time in terms of the approval that everything has to be planned out. And then the key thing here is the significant benefit when someone's in the United States and being able to file the I-485, because that opens up several planning opportunities as well. In terms of, you always have to also look at the type of visa that you're on, because if you're on an E2, the E2 is not a dual intent visa. So you have to be careful about exiting and entering and in particular renewing, if you have to renew your visa during that period. You have to really plan in advance and make sure that you're not going to run into difficulties. Parallel green card strategies. We often have people who apply for multiple green cards at the same time. We have someone a direct investment EB-5 that was just approved, but she's probably also eligible for the national interest waiver. And so we're still going to continue with the national interest waiver petition. But when we were continuing with the national interest waiver petition, because then she wouldn't have to be subject to removing the conditions after a period of time, et cetera. So definitely something to keep in mind. And as I said, kind of planning is key. So I think that we can move to the questions and answers, and I don't see that anyone has added any questions. So So I think that we'll stop it here. And what we will do is, as I mentioned, we will send around a copy of the PowerPoint. We'll send around a copy of the recording. We will send the EB-5 guide. When you do get the copy of recording, it's going to be already on YouTube. So again, encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you do have kind of questions about your specific situation, please feel free to set up a consultation, and we'd be happy to go over EB-5 with you. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.